Hi, and welcome to PDQ for Canon Pro Series. In this video, I'll be showing PDQ that is specifically made for the Canon Pro Series roll printers. So the Canon 2000, 2000S, 4000, 4000S, 6000, 6000S. That's the only printers it was made for. Why did we make a specific version for that type of printer? It's a good range of printers, and it has a completely different way of interfacing than all other Canon printers or Epson or HP printers. So we needed to make something that does support it, and the generic version of PDQ does not support the Canon Pro Series. So that's why we made the new version. And very likely we'll be making new versions for new specific models so we can more closely support specific models with PDQ. So let me first show you my screen. This is my desktop, and on it you will see the interface of PDQ for Canon Pro Series. As you can see, it has a printer on it. It shows you jobs and how it would print those on the roll, and I've loaded up some jobs just to show you how it would look. You get a good overview of what you're printing before you start printing. And it's easy to do things like rotate files, make them bigger, give them a canvas edge, tile them into much larger prints than your page size, make them black and white, all kinds of editing you can do with crops and scaling and rotating and using the droplets to do things more quickly by having predefined sizes and methods defined per droplet. I won't go into those in detail because there's a video series on how to use PDQ, which is also valid for this version. Although this one looks a little bit nicer because it has all retina icons and is a retina display, it still uses the same functionality as the previous versions of PDQ. So what we'll be covering in this video is how you make use of the specific Canon Pro Series advantages. And the perhaps biggest advantage of the Canon Pro Series is that they allow you to use profiles that are embedded in the printer. With all Epson printers, your profiles are external. So you need to have the correct profile, and you have to load it up manually yourself before you can start printing. With the Canon series, much like the HP Z series, you can have that handled by the printer. So what we've done in this version is make that work in conjunction with color sync, because color sync is something that's hard to bypass. It's the color management system on Mac, and it is no longer possible or very difficult to print anything without color sync being active, unless you create a driver from scratch. And why do that if the manufacturer already has created a driver? Well, the reason we do want to create an interface to use the driver is that printer manufacturers are notoriously bad at making a printer driver intuitive. If you look at the Canon driver, it's got all kinds of options that seem to be conflicting. Like you have double output quality. You have a custom quality with normal, fine, and fast and whatever kind of terms they use, and 300 dpi and 600 and unidirectional, bidirectional, all kinds of settings that mean absolutely nothing to most people. And if you do the wrong combination of any of those settings, you will get a print that is oddly enough twice as big as you want or half the size. And that has happened to me also using this printer, just developing the driver for, or the version of PDQ for this printer series, that I ended up with figuring out how to get the right size out of this printer, because it's so easy to not get the right size. But with PDQ it's a lot easier to do, because basically in PDQ all you do is select your page width, your roll width, and the rest is just handled by PDQ, because nobody cares about the height of the page size that you print on if you're printing on a roll, because it's a roll. The only thing you care about is the used roll length, which is indicated by PDQ. so you can see if it fits on your printer. If you have it on your printer for remaining length, you can see if it will fit. And if a print doesn't fit, the Canon Pro Series is nice enough to tell you before it starts printing. So it won't just print and say, oh, sorry, ran out. No, it will warn you before you start printing, we don't have enough media, do you want to continue? Then it's your own risk. But this will make it a lot easier for you to calculate what's happening. So once you install PDQ for Canon Pro Series and you install your Mac driver for your particular version of Mac OS, the first thing you'd have to do is, you do that once, you go to setup and you are forced to select one of your drivers which you just installed. So in this case we're using the 4000S. And that just tells PDQ to which printer driver feed the information it's making for prints. So it's the last time you'll choose the driver, because from now on all you'll be doing is just adding jobs and settings for print quality. So for those settings, let me show you where they're done. We tried to make them as simple as possible. We could not leave out the black ink or photo ink selection. It's something you have to be aware of, that there are two blacks in your Canon Pro Series, a matte black and a photo black. And on a matte paper, a photo black does not generate proper black. And on a photo paper, matte black produces pretty okay black, but once you start rubbing on the print, you'll get dirty fingers and the black will rub off. So it's not compatible. The matte ink is not compatible with anything that is satin or high gloss, and the photo ink is not compatible with anything that's matte, as it will not produce a proper black. So you have to make that selection. If you use a Canon media, it's pretty easy, because you basically have the name of the media, and if you see it, you will see if it's glossy at all or not. If it has no gloss at all, it's matte. If it has the slightest gloss, it's not going to be matte, so it's going to be the photo mode. And the print quality, we try to keep as simple as possible. You have a slider which goes from fast to super fine. So it's either fast or best quality, and it's always a compromise between the two, and you decide which setting works best for you. The super fine is the slowest, obviously, and gives you the nicest output. So if you're in no rush at all, I'd say go for super fine. And for really fast matte CAD drawings, use the fast matte, and it would print with this big sections at once. So it's very fast if you do it like that. But if you do it wrong, you'll get very fast, very bad prints. So you make the selection if it's glossy, so it's a photo paper at all, or not, and you select your wanted print quality. The other thing you can do is you can decide if you want to cut after print and print after reception. So if you have a very slow printer connection, so network that is very slow, you might want to check this one. It will take a long time before the job gets to your printer, but once it's there, it will then only start printing when all the data is there. If you don't have this one checked, then you'll probably see your printer do this, stop, do this, stop, and it will take a long time, and it might affect the print quality. On a good network, you don't need it. The very first version of firmware, you did need it, because they kind of made a mess of the interfacing, so it was way too slow. So you had to use print after reception, and reception would take like 15-20 minutes to get a file into your printer. But they fixed that with firmware updates. So if you're not on the latest firmware version for this printer, go to the latest version of the firmware, because it does solve a lot of issues in that sense. So the color management is where you have options. If you use a Canon media, you can use the default one, because that will use the profile that is embedded in the Canon series. So if you load up a media on your Canon, you select which media profile it is. So you select, for instance, like a satin photo 240, and then you would just say, I want the default printer color behavior with that. So it uses the profile that you selected in printer. And that's the advantage of having the profile in the printer, because it's much easier to select. The other way of doing it is to select Application PDQ Managed, and that opens up this interface where you can select the profile and select the rendering intent as a bonus, do black point compensation, yes or no, and change the saturation if you want, from neutral to under or oversaturated. For most uses, the default is fine. If you want to get the maximum or have more control, then it would be useful to use PDQ application profiles. In both cases, if you want to create a profile for something that is not supported by your Canon printed by default, you'd have to use the Canon utilities to first make that profile. And it can be done in steps, so if you don't have profiling software, you can print targets. I will place links on this page where you can download targets. If you submit those using the Adobe Color Printer utility, for which I will also place a download link on the website, and if you print that target using that piece of software, which is free, and then send us the target, we will scan the target for you, make a profile out of it, and send you the ICC profile by email. So you can have a perfectly profiled system without owning the profiling solution yourself. So how do we do that? The way Canon decided to do things is with modular software. So if you go to the driver, this is just a Canon driver. If you go to settings, there's an option for utility. And if you say open printer utility, or blocked with this one, so I close it. And if I say open printer utility, it basically launches that same utility. And what can that do? Well, the part we're interested in here now is the media information. Because if you do a synchronize here, I won't do it right now because it takes a while, it will synchronize the media that's on your printer with what's on your system that you install the driver on. So if you have a printer that's already profiled and it has all kinds of customized profiles, and you go to a new Mac or second Mac and you want to have that one use the same profiles, this is what you use to get those profiles synchronized on the system. And once you've done that, you have to restart the application from which you're printing to get the information up to date. So it basically has a predefined set of files telling the printer what to do with color. How do you get those extra files? If you want to have a custom profile made, you use the Adobe Color Printer utility. But you can't just print it and then name it in the printer. So the best way to do it is to use the Canon Quick Utility Toolbox, which comes as an option in your installer. So if you download the driver, there's an option for additional software, and one of them is the Canon Quick Utility Toolbox. And if you launch that, you can select your printer and you can do media configuration, which will bring up yet another interface, and I can say OK to that one, and it will talk to the printer and it will get all the possible profiles that are on that system synchronized with your or displayed on your media configuration tool. And the media configuration tool is where you create a new custom profile. And the advantage of doing it there is that it allows you to define a media name that you choose. So if you have a non-Canon media from Hanemühle or from Epson or from HP or from whatever manufacturer you prefer, because it's something that you prefer over what Canon offers, or Canon simply doesn't have, you can define the name of that media, and users that want to use that media can then select on the printer the media name that is the same as what's on the box, which makes it a lot easier to use. So I've done a few custom medias on this one already, and if I go to custom you can see them here. So on my Canon Pro I can choose under custom all these media types which were created here with the Adobe Color Printer utility and the Canon Quick Utility Toolbox and our profiling software. So for you to add a custom media and get a custom profile, you'd have to add that media first. So what you do first is you go to the plus here, create custom paper, which will then ask you to acquire the information online, which basically makes the software go to Canon's online library of available color profiles for this particular printer. And those are only Canon profiles, obviously, because they're not going to be providing you anything for Epson or HP or any other manufacturer that's not Canon. But the nice thing about the tool is that it allows you to select a media that is as close as possible similar to a media of Canon, and that means in terms of grammage, of how glossy it is, and those kind of things, which type of media it is, so if it's like a photo paper or a fine art paper. So you basically do your selection of the type of paper and then the weight and the gloss, and if you do a selection of that, you use that as a basis for creating the profile. And even if you don't have profiling software, if you make the right choice and make the right selection of media type, so it matches closely what you're actually using, you will end up with a profile, even without customized profiling, that works pretty well. But you still have the advantage of having the customized name, so you don't have to know and remember, oh yeah, for that particular media I have to choose this media type, and for that media I have to use that media type on the printer. It just gets more complicated that way. Now the downside of this software is, that's the Canon Quick Utility Toolbox, is that it's not quick. They call it Canon Quick Utility Toolbox, but it's slow. It takes a long time to get all the information, and you are simply waiting for it for a long time. So I'm just trying to fill up time here, and the advantage is that you don't have to do this weekly or even monthly. You only do this when you have a media type that isn't in your printer yet, and once you put it in there, you're good to go, because you will put it in preferably in a way that you can use the calibration on the printer to keep it up to date, which may be a good topic to discuss while we're waiting. There's a difference between calibration and profiling. Calibration means that we make sure that when we send 20% cyan, we get something that resembles 20% cyan and not 19 or 22. So it basically prints all the basic colors of the printer in a little pattern of boxes, and it scans them automatically with a built-in color sensor and makes a linearization curve, calibration curve from that. So that means that if you do that before you create a profile, which you definitely should, you have a system that you can reproduce. So when your printer changes, when it gets older, when the media maybe changes a little bit, you can still get back to the same basis by using a calibration again. So you reselect, calibrate, and you don't have to make a new profile. You simply recalibrate that media, and the profile is made normally on a calibrated system. So that means your profile is valid as long as you keep calibrating. This same principle has been used in Hewlett-Packard Z series printers for how long now? Probably 12 years. And it's a good system, because basically you're making sure that you're using a profile and keeping that profile up to date by calibrating your printer. And that's a system that you can just, or that's a function you can just use by saying calibrate, and it's automatic. And your profiling is never completely automatic. It can be on the HP Z series, but it's not on the Canon. There is no built-in spectrophotometer, so you have to do the profiling externally. And I'm still waiting on the Canon Quick Utility Toolbox, but it will get there eventually. It's just a bit frustrating to have to wait for it. And I don't like editing the videos, so you might notice that the videos that I do are always from start to finish one take. I think that proves that I know what I'm talking about. It makes it more credible because I don't have to edit and take out mistakes. Sure, I'll make a little mistake every once in a while, but if I cannot do it right and record it, how can I expect anyone to do it right by looking at the video? So it's finally done. So we now have the Create Custom Paper menu, and if I have a media that is a fine art and is of high grammage, I can just go to Fine Art, which will show me the fine art media types that are available. And if it is like a smooth fine art or a really textured one and it's matte, and the fine art of course would be normally with a matte ink, then there are also ones available that use both matte and photo black ink. You will get more dense blacks by using both, but if you're using a glossy media with any gloss at all, don't go for matte because it won't work. So in this case, for fine art, I would choose, say I want to do something like a Hanemüller photo rag, which is a textured fine art paper. I would choose fine art, and this is creatable. That means I can do a color calibration on this media. So if you choose one that's not creatable, you'll be able to make a profile, but that profile will be valid only for a certain time. If the printer changes a little bit, you have to recreate the profile, which means you have to have the profiling solution in-house yourself. If you don't, always go for a creatable one and make sure that you choose one as close as possible to the specifications of the media that you're profiling. So I'll just select for this one the fine art textured and go to next. It confirms my selection. And then the nice thing is it takes me to a little interface that allows me to set the name of that particular media. So it shows me it's a copy of fine art textured, because that's the basis it's using for this media, but I don't have to use that as a name, because if this is my Hanemüller, whatever, I'll just call it whatever, then that's the name I want to give it. Let me give it a proper name. Whatever. I can't type today. And I'll do the same here with a proper spelling for Hanemüller, whatever. So I try to keep those names the same. I would say always make them the same, because you'll make it more confusing if you don't. It does mean that you sometimes have to shorten the name, because the name on the operation panel, so that's just a control panel on your printer, is limited in size. So don't make it too big, because you won't be able to put that name on the panel, and it will just say it won't do it. So make them the same, and make them short, and make them the same for both the panel and the printer driver. And if I say next, it will actually add that paper to my printer. So it will search for my printer. I don't know why it's doing that, because I started by saying which printer it is, but it's doing that anyway. Okay, I have to execute it, and now it starts to update the media information in my printer. So once it's done with this, I can go to my paper menu on the printer and select Hanemüller whatever as a media. Does that make perfect prints? Not by itself, no, because I just selected a profile that is similar to the media type that I'm trying to profile. So the next step would be to create a profile using that setting. So once it's done updating the information, you would go to your printer and go to your media that's loaded, load up the new media that you want profiled, and then say media type, select the new media, so in this case the Hanamil or whatever, and register it. Once you've done that, you are ready to move on to the next step for profiling. You don't have to, but you can. Now, let me first show you what you can edit here. So if I go to edit yes, this allows me to do a custom profile. If I don't, I can say no, and I'll use the generic profile from Canon, simulating as close as possible the media that I chose. It won't be perfect, but it might be pretty good. So on this one, I would say do a paper feed adjustment at least. Paper feed adjustment prevents horizontal banding. If the paper roll comes out like that and you get white lines horizontally, or you get overlapping darker lines, and they could be at a distance of a few millimeters, or about a 1/16th of an inch or 32nd of an inch, depending on your print speed, you need to do a paper feed adjustment. It's not your printer broken, it's just every media has a different thickness and they're not all the same in how you calibrate them. So Canon does allow you to do it specifically based on the unique name that you gave your media, and then you would have a perfectly aligned print. And it basically does a print of a gray pattern with all kinds of lines on it. You won't be able to make any sense of it, but the printer does. It scans it and it makes sure that paper feed is exact. So that's the least thing you can do, and then you update it. The next thing you would do if you want to create a profile for it is go to Calibration Target and execute that, because that basically calibrates your media. It doesn't have a new profile for it then, but it at least calibrates, so it makes sure that when you send 20% of a certain color, you get 20% on paper and not 25 or 19 or 16. So that's a good thing to do always. So always do the paper feed and always do the calibration for a custom media that you added at least once, and recalibrate regularly to keep it up to date. Now the next step is going to be the most complicated one, because if we want to create a custom profile, because if it's really a different media than we could select from Canon, the profile that we chose won't be exact either. Then we go to the final part after the calibration and we can select the profile. How do we get the profile? Well, we have to print a target. And the target is simply a print of a target file. I'll place a link on the website for the target file, and that we print with Adobe Color Printer Utility, for which I will also include a link on the website AppForce.One. So if you have both files, you download the Adobe utility, you download the file to create the profile. Then at this step, before you move on, before you update, you go to the Adobe Color Printer Utility. Let me go there. And there you would say File, Open. And you would choose the TIFF file that I downloaded. In this case, it's opening the folder where I stored it. And it will look something like this, and it's 1,000 color patches. We can create different ones. If you require one with more, it's possible, but we figured that 1,000 colors is a pretty good start point for a color calibration. And basically what this allows you to do is, if you go to File, Page Setup, it allows you to select your printer. So in this case we already selected it, and if we do an A3 size for this one, because it's 2 A4 targets, it's big enough. If it's an A4 target that you're printing, you choose A4, and then you'd have to make sure that you do the right orientation. By doing an A3 size and doing these combined, you don't have to worry about that. So that's easier to use. And if you then OK that and say File, Print, it would take you to the Canon 4S driver, and in color matching it would automatically switch off color sync, so there is no option to change anything here because it's bypassing. That's the entire thing we want to do. We don't want to use color sync now because we would get a profile over our target print, which would mess up the profiling. And we can choose the quality and media, so, and we should. So in this case we would go for the media type custom and then choose the Hanemüller whatever, which is not in here yet because we didn't synchronize media types. So if you come here and say, oh, I don't have this, that's because we did not synchronize the media type. So let me show you how that works. So I don't actually want to print it now. I'll cancel this one and I'll quit the utility once more. And I'll go to the this one here and I'll say update and OK. And this also talks to the printer, so it knows there's a new media configuration done. That's the Hanemüller whatever. I'll say update. And I'll have to enter my password and I have to be patient because it gets the information from the printer of all the profiles that are on the printer. So basically I should have done this before showing you the Adobe Color Printer utility. But this way I show you that this actually does get that information in there. I know this is going to be somewhat difficult for some people, so if you say, oh, I don't want to bother, just use the standard profile and you're probably going to be okay with it. But if you really want to get the most from your printer, a customized profile is always better than a factory profile. So now it says it's been added, and to enable the updated information, restart the application. Well, that's easy for Adobe Color Printer utility because we did a quit on that one. So we can now just go to Adobe. We have a few Adobes here. Color Printer utility, which would launch the utility again. And I would check my combined file again, open it, and now I can go to print. And if all is well, I now should have a Hanemüller whatever option in my media types. So color is still disabled because I wanted to create a target which should not have color management on it. And if I go to quality and media and go to my custom papers, I have the Hanemüller whatever as an option, and then I would choose the printed quality that I would prefer to use. So we kept the names of the qualities the same, so if you go to custom, you have the same name, so you can go to superfine on some, not on all, you can go to fine on this one or somewhere in between. So I would say use this one's probably going to be easier, so do a high one. You don't want to create a black and white photo print because you can't make a black and white target this way. We might cover that in a different video, but in this case you just choose high. The most important one is that you use the right media type and a quality that you normally would print in or something close to it. So don't print this in fast and then always do your production in high quality or the other way around, because then the profiles will be off. Now I'm not going to really print this, but this would generate the print, the actual print, and that would have to be scanned by a spectrophotometer. Now we have one at Color Plaza, AppForce.One. We have 4 actually, but if you don't, we can scan it for you. It's a service we provide for free for those people that send us a target. So if you ship us a target, you can just cut it to A4 size, put it in an envelope and ship it to us. We will scan that profile for you and email you back an ICC profile, because that's basically what we do. We get the print, we scan it, and we generate a profile from that and we email that to you. So you'd have to provide us the email information on which you would like to receive the target as well. So once you've done that and you've received the email from us with the profile, then you would go to the Browse button in the Edit Custom Paper, and you would choose the media profile, the ICC profile that we sent you. So let me just go to Profiles and show you some of the ones I've done earlier. And this would be an Epson Premium Luster profile that we did some time ago. So if we do an open here, that actually adds that information to this particular media configuration, and then if we then do update, then we basically upload the ICC profile to the printer. And from that point onwards, within PDQ, finally we can go back to printing, we can just select, when we load the paper up in the right role, select default and use that, or select application managed and load up the profile you received by email and setting the rendering intent, black point composition and saturation. If you don't know what these are, we have videos on that. So there are videos on rendering intent, on black point composition, on the website here. So I'll try to add a link to the video page as well, and I will explain to you how to use these. But if you don't want to bother, you just go to default printer and use it like that, and you will get good color behavior from your media in a somewhat roundabout way, because it's not exactly easy to get there. But once you have it, the only thing you do is you load up the paper, and the only thing you do here is select either matte or photo and select your print quality that you use when you made the profile. So when you do send us a target specifying which quality you made, so we'll name the profile for you to remember which quality mode it was made in. It will make it easier to select the right one. Okay, that should give you pretty much perfect colors. If you want to verify those colors, we have a utility called Color Checker. If you print this sample or this strip under a print, that's a strip that we can measure, or you can measure, with an i1 Pro from X-Rite. And if we scan that with Color Checker app, which is also available in the App Store, then you can get a pass or a fail on that print. So if you want to generate some proof to your customers that you've profiled and that the printer is behaving within specifications and within color accuracy, you can scan that, and you will get a pass if it's profiled. And if it needs to be reprofiled, you'll get a fail, and you'll know how much it will be off in color. Okay, I'm sorry this took a long time. It is a lengthy topic to discuss, but hope you find it useful. If you do find any problems or issues in PDQ for Canon Pro Series, please do feel free to contact us. There's a contact form on the website which you can use to submit that, so we know exactly what you're talking about. It has room for feature requests or bug reports. Please report anything that doesn't work. We're willing to help improve on this software by just creating free upgrades for those who purchased it, and we prefer to get questions from you on how to do something over you just filing a doesn't work review, because that doesn't help anyone, and it doesn't help you because you spent money on getting this software, and we'd like you to get the most out of the software. So thanks for watching. Sorry it took so long. I hope you will enjoy using PDQ for Canon Pro Series. If you have any questions or remarks or comments, feel free to contact, and I'd like to thank you for watching. Bye-bye.